right, let me tell you about the trip of a lifetime for me and my best friend Scott. Spring break. But it's not what you think. You see, we were sophomores at Ohio State. Well, exactly. It's exactly what you think it was, right? We were following the siren song of beers, beaches, and bikinis. We just had one big problem. We were stranded in Ohio. You see, we had booked passage on a charter bus that was going to take us right from campus directly to our hotel in Panama City Beach, Florida, but it got canceled at the last minute. We were too poor to fly down. Nobody had a car. We were too young to rent a car. So instead of this trip of a lifetime, I was back home in Cleveland at my mom's house, being reminded to eat my vegetables because they're good for me. But then Scott calls, and he's got this brilliant idea. Greyhound buses. He says that we can afford them and that they can get us to spring break in time. But he says we have to leave right away. So at midnight that night, Scott's mom drops us off downtown Cleveland, the Greyhound bus station. We walk into the bus station, and I look around, and it's quite the cast of characters in there. And I felt like, wow, this is probably how Luke Skywalker felt when he walked into that cantina in Star Wars. But we had no time to mingle, so we got our tickets and headed out to the bus. Now, the first thing that I noticed about our bus was our bus driver. She looked exactly like Pat, the androgynous character from Saturday Night Live, except our bus driver had gray hair. So she also had a name tag on that said she was a 22-year veteran bus driver, and this made me feel good. Pat's going to help us get to Florida safely and on time. The second thing that I noticed about our bus is that the seats are tiny. I get on the bus, and I feel like I'm the Jolly Green Giant on a tour bus for the Lollipop Guild. I had friends who were teasing me that I was going to come home from spring break with an STD, and now I'm thinking it's going to be way more embarrassing to come home from spring break with deep vein thrombosis. But it's spring break, right? So Scott and I find two seats. They're right across from each other, and he picks the seat next to this sweet little old lady. She looks like one of the Golden Girls. I get the seat next to this guy who's leaning up against the window. He's got one eye closed, one eye opened. Hard to tell if he's asleep, maybe in a coma, possibly dead. I sit down and I look over at Scott, and he's already starting to fuss with the fan to try to get some ventilation, and he can't get it to work. So he looks over at the sweet little Golden Girl, and he says, "Excuse me, do you know how to get this to work?" And she says, and this is a direct quote, "You have to wait for the bus to start moving." And she yells at Scott so loud that she wakes up Cyclops over here. Now he's up, and he doesn't look happy, and he's staring at me with both eyes open, and I can see it out of the corner of my eye. But thankfully, he closes his eyes, goes back to sleep, and I'm just glad I'm not on a bus next to a corpse. After that, the bus pulls out of the Cleveland station, and we're on our way to spring break. Now, have you ever been in a car and somebody slams on the brakes and you get that sudden rush of adrenaline and fear and confusion? I guarantee you that feeling is 1,000 times more terrifying at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Greyhound bus. I know this because gray-haired Pat slammed on the brakes on the freeway. She gets on the speaker system and she apologizes. She said she had to do that because she almost hit a deer. Now I'm thinking, thank God we had a veteran bus driver, because if we hit a deer, spring break might be canceled. So I really appreciate gray-haired Pat at this time. But a little while later, just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear gray-haired Pat sneeze. And then she sneezes again and again and again, like a machine gun of sneezes. She actually pulls the bus off to the side of the interstate, and she gets up out of her seat and she starts walking towards the back of the bus. And you can see in her eyes that she is pissed off, right? She gets to the back of the bus and she demands to know who is smoking on her bus, because she only sneezes when she smells cigarette smoke. Now, the back of the bus people, those, any back of the bus people in here? Those were the unsavory people from the bus station, right? Now, as individuals, they don't have good hygiene. They don't make good eye contact. They look at you like you're Medusa. They look away. But as a group, as a collective entity, they had this really strong snitches get stitches Warsaw Pact, and nobody was going to snitch on somebody else. Nobody was going to rat somebody out. So gray-haired Pat has to do the walk of shame back to the front of the bus without finding the perpetrator. I lose a little bit of faith in gray-haired Pat because she just delayed our trip to Florida by 20 minutes, and she got outsmarted by the back of the bus people. So I was lukewarm on her now. But onward to spring break, right? Guess what happened next? You're a winner if you said gray-haired Pat gets pulled over for speeding, right? 22 years experience driving a bus, and she doesn't even attempt to outrun the cops, right? She spends 20 minutes outside with the patrolman. She comes back on the bus. She's crying. She's weeping. She spends another 20 minutes collecting herself before we can drive away. And now it's obvious that gray-haired Pat is a detriment to us getting to spring break on time. But shortly after that, we finally arrive. Finally, we arrive in Columbus, which is where we were supposed to start our initial charter bus trip. But there was some good news. The fates had smiled upon us, and gray-haired Pat was no longer our bus driver. We had a new bus driver. Now, here's a fun fact I learned on this trip. An average Greyhound bus seats 56 people. But Greyhound, not afraid to add an extra 8, 10, maybe even 12 people to a bus. The bus is full, and they just keep loading people on. So these people are just sitting in the aisle. They throw their rucksack on the floor. They pop a squat. They sit down. And I'm just sitting in my seat, and I'm looking at these people, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, my God, look at all that leg room they have out there. But after that, the bus cleared out a little bit, and it was a smaller crowd on the bus, and there was maybe 5 or 6 of us in the front of the bus, maybe 5 or 6 people in the back. Somebody in the front had a sleeve of Trivial Pursuit cards. We started playing Trivial Pursuit. We're laughing. We're having fun. So much fun that a couple people from the back of the bus come up and join us. And it turns out they are actually okay with direct eye contact. They can do that. But the hygiene, still a little sketchy for those folks. But what was interesting about this group is that it sort of formed its own identity. It kind of became its own thing. So we would stop at a small town, and maybe 1 or 2 people would leave the group, but new people would come on the bus, and 1 or 2 of them would join the group. So the group kept changing, and we just kept having fun with whoever was in our group. We were playing 20 questions. We were playing I Spy. We were adults. We were strangers. We were on a Greyhound bus driving through the South of America, not South America, but the South, and we had so much fun. And we got to know each other. People were chatty. What's your name? Where are you from? Where are you heading? And some people, they would sprinkle in a little bit more details about their trip. And that's when it hit me that everybody in our group, probably everybody on the bus, whether they said it out loud or not, they had their own bus story, right? They were on that bus, and they were traveling to somewhere, to someone, or to something, or they were traveling away from somewhere, someone, something. Every traveler on that bus was on their own personal odyssey. For me and Scott, it just happened to be spring break. And then just like that, 34 hours after leaving Cleveland, we arrive in Panama City Beach, Florida. A couple of laughs, some high fives, some hugs, and now it's our turn to leave the group. So we depart from the bus. The sun is shining down on us. I have feelings coming back into my legs. Everything is great. And Scott and I spend the next several days just collecting all the memories that we originally wanted. The beers, the beaches, the bikinis. And we added those memories to our unexpected memories of buses. The ride home was a little bit longer, 36 hours to get home. And most of that time was spent just sleeping or staring out the window, too tired to sleep. But there is one story or one part of the trip that I do remember, one crystal clear memory. We were about 100 miles just outside the middle of nowhere, and I look over at Scott, and his face is sunburned, his eyes are bloodshot, he's eating Pringles, and he's drinking out of a warm 2-liter bottle of Sprite. And he just looks over at me, and he just says, "Dude, I think I just need to eat some vegetables."